The lace on my dress was a masterpiece of strategic design. From a distance, it appeared soft, romantic, traditional, a confection of ivory and pearl. But up close, the pattern was sharp, almost geometric, a subtle, interlocking web. It was, in its own way, a warning, a promise. It was armor. I smoothed the hand down the silk, my heart beating at a calm, controlled 72 beats per minute. For a bride on her wedding day, that was abnormal. But I was not a bride. Not really. I was a strategist on the verge of executing the most important maneuver of my career. My marriage to Liam was a happy consequence of the operation, but it was not the primary objective. The primary objective was seated in the front pew, radiating a cold, regal disapproval that could chill champagne from 50 paces. Genevieve de Lacy, my mother-in-law-to-be, the matriarch, the queen, the architect of my current, calculated predicament. The venue was her choice, of course, the de Lacy ancestral home, a sprawling stone mansion dripping with ivy and old money, set on 100 acres of aggressively manicured gardens. I had agreed to it without argument. One does not spring a trap in unfamiliar territory. You let the target choose the ground. You let them feel comfortable, powerful, secure in their own domain. It makes their fall that much more spectacular. Liam squeezed my hand. "You're trembling," he whispered, his voice a warm counterpoint to the cavernous chill of the church on the estate grounds. "No," I murmured back, my eyes fixed on his mother. "I'm vibrating. There's a difference." He knew, of course, he knew. Liam was my partner in all things, including this. He was the loving Trojan horse I had ridden right through the gates of his family's dynasty. He loved his mother, but he was not blind to the rot in her soul. The rot she was about to display for the world. The priest, a man whose family had been on the de Lacy payroll for 3 generations, droned on. I analyzed the guests. The west wing of the church was filled with Genevieve's army, old money families, influential board members from de Lacy Holdings, political allies, a formidable force. The east wing was my much smaller contingent. A few trusted friends, my parents, and a handful of special invitations. A Mr. Abernathy, who was a quiet, unassuming man from the Securities and Exchange Commission, attending as my uncle, a Ms. Renault, a famously tenacious journalist from the Wall Street Journal, masquerading as a college friend. They were my hidden bishops and rooks, placed carefully on the board. Genevieve was wearing a gown of pale gold, a color far too close to white for a guest at a wedding. A deliberate, passive-aggressive statement. Her smile, when it chanced upon me, was a masterpiece of social warfare, a fractional upturn of the lips that did not touch the cold granite of her eyes. She believed I was a gold digger, a clever, pretty upstart who had somehow bewitched her only son and was now poised to sink her claws into the family fortune. She had underestimated me. It was a fatal and common mistake. "Do you, Liam, take Annalise to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the priest asked. "I do," Liam said, his voice clear and strong, his eyes locked on mine. In them, I saw love, trust, and the shared, terrible knowledge of what was to come. "And do you, Annalise?" the priest began. This was the moment. I watched Genevieve. I saw the subtle shift in her posture, the tightening of her manicured hands on her clutch, the almost imperceptible nod she gave to a man standing near the back of the church, the actor, hired for a pittance to play the part of the disgruntled ex-lover. It was all so crude. I started to say, "Stop." The voice that echoed through the church was not the hired actor's. It was Genevieve's. She had decided to play the starring role herself. Even better. She rose to her feet, a vision of righteous, trembling fury. A gasp rippled through the pews. The air crackled with the delicious, horrified thrill of high society drama. "This wedding cannot continue," Genevieve announced, her voice ringing with practiced sincerity. "I cannot, in good conscience, stand by while my son is manipulated by this schema." Liam stiffened beside me, but I put a calming hand on his arm. "Let her speak," I conveyed with a single look. "Let her build her own pyre. This woman," Genevieve continued, pointing a diamond-laden finger at me, "is not who she says she is. She has preyed on my son's good nature, on his kindness. Her family is unremarkable. Her background is a fiction, and her motives are a poison directed at the heart of our family. She took a dramatic step into the aisle. She has refused to sign the prenuptial agreement our family lawyers drafted, a standard document meant to protect our legacy. and I have discovered why. She produced a sheaf of papers from her clutch, forgeries. Very good ones. I had to admit, these are her real demands. A list of assets to be transferred to her name upon marriage, including a controlling interest in DeLacy Holdings itself. She is not a bride. She is a corporate raider in a wedding dress. The murmurs in the church grew to a roar. The board members were looking at me with expressions of shock and betrayal. The society mavens were drinking it in, their eyes wide. Genevieve stood there, basking in the chaos she had created, a triumphant, avenging angel. She had ruined my wedding. She had exposed me as a fraud. She had saved her son and her empire. She had just triggered every single wire in my trap. I did not cry. I did not shout. I simply turned to Liam, who looked at me with unwavering trust. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. Then, I turned to the priest, who looked as though he might faint. "Could you hold this for me, Father?" I asked, handing him my bouquet. Then I took the microphone from his trembling hand. "Thank you, Genevieve," I said, my voice amplified, cutting through the noise with calm, surgical precision. The entire church fell silent, stunned by my composure. "Thank you for bringing your concerns to light so publicly. It actually saves a great deal of time." I turned to face the stunned guests. "My mother-in-law is correct about a few things," I began, my tone even and conversational. "It is true that I am not exactly who she thinks I am, and it is true that my interest in the DeLacy family goes far beyond my love for her son." I saw a flicker of confusion on Genevieve's face. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. "You see," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the board members, "Genevieve has operated under the assumption that I come from nothing, that I am dazzled by her wealth. This is an understandable, if flawed, analysis. The truth is, I have spent the last 10 years as a forensic accountant. I specialize in identifying and untangling complex corporate fraud. My clients are often very discreet and very, very wealthy." I nodded toward the back of the church. "If you'll direct your attention to the rear screen." On cue, a massive screen, hidden behind a tapestry of the DeLacy family crest, descended from the ceiling. My ally, a tech expert disguised as a wedding planner, hit a button. An image flashed onto the screen. It was a high-resolution photograph of the actor Genevieve had hired, the man she had just rendered obsolete. Beside it was a copy of a wire transfer, $50,000, from a holding company Genevieve controlled, to the actor's personal bank account. The memo line read, "For services rendered." Genevieve's first mistake, I announced, was assuming I could be intimidated. Her second was assuming I wouldn't do my own due diligence. Genevieve's face had gone from triumphant to pale. The color was draining from her cheeks. "As for the prenuptial agreement," I went on, "she is right. I did refuse to sign it. But not because I wanted to take the DeLacy's money, but because I needed to protect my own." Another image hit the screen, a detailed summary of my personal net worth, a portfolio of stocks, real estate, and private equity investments that was, to the shock of everyone in the room, nearly double the estimated value of Genevieve's personal holdings. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. "My love for Liam is the purest thing in my life," I said, my voice softening for a moment as I looked at him. "But when I agreed to marry him, I knew I was also marrying into his family and into their business. And as a forensic accountant, I have a professional and personal obligation to assess risk." I turned my attention back to the screen and back to Genevieve. "The real reason I am here today, at this wedding, in this church, is not to take your company, Genevieve. It is to save it from you." The screen shifted. Now it showed a complex web of flowcharts, bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell corporations in Panama, a systematic 20-year history of embezzlement and tax fraud, all leading back to a single source, Genevieve DeLacy. "For the past 6 months," I explained, my voice cold and hard as iron, "at the request of my fiancé, who has long been concerned about his mother's management style, I have been conducting a full forensic audit of DeLacy Holdings." Liam stepped forward and took my hand, a silent public confirmation of his allegiance. Genevieve was swaying on her feet now, her face a mask of horror and disbelief. She looked at her son, who met her gaze with a look of profound, sorrowful disappointment. "You have been systematically bleeding this company dry for 2 decades, I stated, my voice echoing in the dead silence, "skimming profits, hiding assets, defrauding your investors, many of whom are here in this room today. I let my gaze drift over the stricken faces of the board members. You weren't trying to protect your family from a gold digger, Genevieve. You were trying to protect your criminal enterprise from a forensic accountant. You were terrified that once I was inside the family, I would discover what you've been doing. I took a step towards her. And you were right, I did. I gestured to my uncle in the East Wing. Mr. Abernathy, I said clearly, I believe you have enough evidence of wire fraud, securities fraud, and tax evasion to proceed. The quiet man from the SEC stood up, pulling a badge from his pocket. Genevieve made a small, strangled sound and collapsed into the nearest pew. I turned to the journalist. Ms. Renaud, you have an exclusive, Ms. Renaud. The story of the year. I've arranged for a full data dump to be sent to your inbox. It's all there. Ms. Renaud's eyes were gleaming. She was already typing furiously on her phone. My wedding was in ruins. Shouts and panicked whispers filled the air. The DeLacy name was being destroyed in real time, in front of the most influential people in their world. It was exactly as I had planned. I walked back to the altar, took my bouquet from the shell-shocked priest, and turned to my fiancé. Liam looked at me, his expression a mixture of awe, relief, and profound love. So, he said, a small smile playing on his lips, does this mean the wedding is off? I looked at the chaos I had wrought, at the weeping, broken form of his mother being spoken to by a federal agent, at the stunned faces of the board members, at the beautiful, terrible, perfect wreckage of my wedding day. No, I said, taking his arm. The wedding was a success. The trap worked. I leaned in and kissed him. A real kiss, a promise of our new beginning. Then I looked out at the scene, my mind already calculating the next steps, appointing an interim CEO, dealing with the SEC fallout, restructuring the company from the ground up. The wedding was over. The real work could now begin. The kiss was an anchor in a hurricane of our own making. Around us, the wedding reception had devolved into a scene of beautiful, glorious chaos. Men in tuxedos were whispering frantically into their phones, their faces pale with the sudden, terrifying realization of their proximity to a massive financial crime. Women in couture gowns were clustered in small groups, their expressions a delicious cocktail of horror and unrestrained glee. This was a scandal that would be talked about for generations. It was perfect. Genevieve, my now former mother-in-law, was no longer a queen. She was a broken woman, huddled in a pew, her pale gold dress looking garish and cheap under the harsh reality of the moment. Mr. Abernathy from the SEC was speaking to her in low, calm tones, while another agent stood respectfully but firmly by. There would be no escape. I had made sure of that. We should probably leave, Liam said against my ear, his voice steady despite the pandemonium, before they ask us for a witness statement. I've already provided Mr. Abernathy with a 300-page sworn affidavit, I murmured back, and Ms. Renaud has a digital copy. We are not witnesses, we are the architects. I pulled back, my focus shifting from the satisfying wreckage of Genevieve's life to the future of my own, the future of the company. I caught the eye of a man standing near the door, a man who looked like an ordinary guest but who was, in fact, the head of the private security firm I had hired. I gave him a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He understood immediately. Operation Secure Asset was now live. By now, his teams would be at the DeLacy Holdings headquarters, changing key codes, securing servers, and ensuring that no one loyal to Genevieve could shred a single document or wipe a single hard drive. The trap wasn't just sprung, it was being meticulously dismantled and catalogued for evidence. Let's go, I said to Liam, taking his hand. We turned our backs on the ruined ceremony and walked down the aisle, not as husband and wife, leaving their wedding, but as two generals leaving a successful battlefield. The guests parted for us, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and grudging respect. They knew a power shift had just occurred. They just didn't understand the scale of it yet. We didn't go to the lavish reception that had been planned in the grand ballroom. We went to the library, a room Genevieve had always considered her private sanctuary. My security head, Mr. Thorne, was waiting for us inside. The heavy oak doors swung shut behind us, muffling the chaos outside. The headquarters are secure, Miss Sterling, Thorne reported. I had instructed his team to use my new name, a name I had legally adopted a week prior in quiet anticipation of this day. All digital and physical assets are locked down. We have control of the building. Excellent, I said. And the board. The 5 remaining members are waiting for you in the main boardroom, as instructed, he said. They are agitated. Let them be, I said. I turned to Liam, who was looking at the rows upon rows of leather-bound books, the silent witnesses to his family's history, a history he had just helped rewrite. Are you all right? I asked him, my voice softening. He looked at me, his eyes clear and resolute. My mother built a prison of lies and a lease for herself, for the company, for me. It's a bitter thing to see your own mother fall, but it would have been a far worse thing to let her continue. I'm not all right, but I will be. He squeezed my hand. We will be fine. That was all I needed to hear. Good, I said, my voice returning to its crisp executive tone, because this is where the real work begins. Thorne escorted us to headquarters. The DeLacy Holdings building was a monument to Genevieve's ego, a sleek tower of glass and steel that dominated the city skyline. But as we walked into the silent, marble-floored lobby, it felt different. It felt like mine. The remaining board members were waiting for us in the top-floor boardroom, the same room where Genevieve had reigned with an iron fist for 2 decades. They were pale, shaken men, stripped of their leader, and terrified of the woman who had just deposed her. I did not sit at the head of the table, not yet. I stood before them, with Liam by my side, a united front. Good evening, gentlemen, I began, my voice calm and commanding. I assume you have all been brought up to speed on the day's events. An older man, Philip Croft, cleared his throat. We are in shock, analyst Genevieve. Genevieve is a criminal who has been systematically defrauding this company for 20 years, I stated, cutting him off cleanly. There was no room for sentiment. Your shock is understandable. Your complicity, however, will be examined in detail. For now, you should know that as of this morning, my husband, Liam DeLacy, exercised his controlling share of the family trust, a trust which gives him, and by extension me, a 62% controlling interest in this company. The air went out of the room. They had thought I was an outsider, a wrecker. They hadn't realized I was now the house. Liam is appointing me as interim CEO, effective immediately, I continued. My first act is to announce a full, transparent audit of every single transaction this company has made for the past 10 years. We will cooperate fully with the SEC. We will find every dollar Genevieve stole. And we will rebuild this company on a foundation of integrity, not deceit. I let my gaze travel from one man to the next. I was evaluating them, assessing their weaknesses, their strengths, their potential for loyalty or betrayal. Some of you may have known what Genevieve was doing. Some of you may have benefited from it. To those people, I offer a simple, one-time deal. Come to me, tell me everything you know, and I will take your cooperation into account. Hide, lie, or obstruct, and I will personally ensure that you share a cell block with your former leader. It was a brutal, direct threat, and it was exactly what was needed. I was not here to make friends. I was here to clean house. The DeLacy name has been tarnished today, I concluded, but it is not broken. Starting tomorrow, we will begin the difficult, painful, but necessary work of restoring it. You can either be a part of that future, or you can be a part of the past that we bury. The choice is yours. I turned and walked to the head of the table, to the large leather chair that had been Genevieve's throne. I didn't sit. I simply placed my hands on the back of it, claiming it as my own. The war was over. The reconstruction had begun, and from the expressions of fear and dawning respect on the faces of the men before me, I knew they understood who was now in charge. The wedding had been a spectacular success. Of course, let us continue with the story. The first day of my reign as CEO began not with a bang, but with a quiet, deliberate purge. I stood alone in the center of Genevieve's office, a space so opulent it was almost offensive. Gilt-edged furniture, plush silk rugs, walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced DeLacy ancestors. It was a throne room, not an office, a monument to ego. My first executive order was not a financial one, it was aesthetic. I called the facilities manager. Everything, I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast space. I want it all gone. The furniture, the rugs, the portraits. Strip it to the bare walls. I want a blank canvas. I could hear the man's bewildered silence on the other end of the line, and have a large whiteboard and 3 commercial-grade data monitors installed on the main wall. I need them by noon. While the staff scrambled to deconstruct Genevieve's identity, I sat on the floor with my laptop, A cup of black coffee Liam had brought me steaming beside it. The company's entire financial history was a fortress of obfuscation, a labyrinth of lies. It was the most complex, most beautifully corrupt system I had ever seen, and I was going to enjoy taking it apart, brick by brick. Liam sat on the floor across from me, reviewing a list of the company's top executives. Half of these people are her cronies, he said, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and resignation. They're not loyal to the company. They were loyal to her system of patronage. I know, I said, my eyes not leaving the screen. Loyalty can be bought, for the right price, or under the right pressure. We just need to find the ones who are more afraid of the SEC than they are of a deposed queen. As if on cue, my new assistant buzzed. Philip Croft is here to see you, Miss Sterling. He says it's urgent. Send him in, I said. Philip, the oldest member of the board, entered the half-empty office, looking like a man walking to his own execution. He clutched a briefcase to his chest, his face pale and drawn. Annalise, he began, his voice raspy. Sit, Philip, I said, gesturing to a packing crate. It was the only other place to sit. A subtle power play. He perched on it, uneasily. I've been with this company for 40 years, he stammered. I knew Alistair, Liam's grandfather. He was a good man. What Genevieve did, she did for 20 years. I interrupted, my voice devoid of sympathy. Which means for half of your career here, you either knew and said nothing, or you were too incompetent to notice. Which is it? He flinched, the question a direct blow. He looked down at his hands for a long moment. A bit of both, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. At first, it was small things. An expensive client dinner that was really a birthday party, a consulting fee paid to a shell company that owned her vacation home. It was easy to look away. She was charismatic, powerful. To cross her was career suicide. And later, I prompted. He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. Later, it became a system. She rewarded loyalty. If you kept your mouth shut, you were taken care of. Inflated bonuses, stock options based on cooked books. We were all complicit. We were all caught in her web. I am not interested in your confession, Philip, I said coldly. I am interested in data. Names, dates, account numbers, who were her key lieutenants, who managed the offshore accounts, who signed off on the fraudulent invoices. He opened his briefcase. Inside were 3 thick ledgers, the real ones, the ones Genevieve kept off the official books. She trusted me, he said. I was her oldest ally. I was the one who was supposed to burn these if anything ever went wrong. I felt a flash of something, not triumph, not satisfaction, just the cold, clean click of a puzzle piece locking into place. You've made a wise decision, Philip, I said, taking the ledgers. Your cooperation will be noted. He had just saved himself from prison and saved me months of work. It was a good trade. The days that followed were a blur of 18-hour workdays, fueled by caffeine and a relentless drive to uncover the truth. My own team of forensic accountants, flown in from New York, descended on the company's headquarters. We turned a conference room into a war room, its walls covered in whiteboards filled with diagrams of shell corporations and money laundering schemes. The scale of Genevieve's fraud was breathtaking. She hadn't just skimmed from the company. She had treated its entire treasury as her personal piggy bank. The wedding alone, the flowers, the catering, the church renovations had been billed to the company as marketing and client relations. Liam was my shadow, my anchor. He learned the business at a ferocious pace, sitting in on every meeting, absorbing every detail. He was the bridge to the employees, the human face of the new regime, while I remained the cold, calculating engine of change. He dealt with the people, while I dealt with the numbers. We were a perfect, symbiotic team. One evening, we were walking through the silent gardens of the DeLacy estate. We had decided to live there, for now. Another asset to be managed. The air was fragrant with night-blooming jasmine, a scent I would forever associate with this strange, tumultuous period of our lives. I used to play hide-and-seek in these gardens as a boy, Liam said quietly, his gaze distant. My mother, she was different then. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe I just couldn't see it. She was a narcissist, Liam, I said, my voice softer than usual. They can be very good at creating an illusion. The world only exists as it relates to them. Is it wrong? He asked, turning to me, his face etched with conflict. that a part of me hates her for what she did, but another part of me just pities her. Hate is an emotion, I replied, taking his hand. Pity is an analysis. You can do both. I stopped and looked up at the grand, dark house. This isn't just about punishing her, Liam. This is about freeing you. Freeing the DeLacy name from the prison she built around it. He pulled me close, and for a moment, we weren't a CEO and her partner. We were just two people, holding on in the aftermath of a storm. The breakthrough came a week later. We were deep in the digital archives, tracing a series of payments to a holding company in Liechtenstein. It was a dead end we'd been chasing for days, but then my lead analyst, a young genius named Anya, found something else. Buried in the metadata of the transactions was a digital watermark, a patent registration. What is this? I asked, leaning over her shoulder. It's a patent for a desalinization technology, Anya said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Highly advanced. It was developed by a small tech firm DeLacy Holdings acquired 8 years ago. Genevieve bought the company, stripped its cash assets, and then buried the subsidiary. It's been dormant ever since. But the patent, Annalise, the patent is revolutionary. It's worth, potentially, 10 times what the company is. We all stared at the screen, at the complex schematics and chemical formulas. It was a diamond, hidden in a mountain of corporate filth. Genevieve, in her endless, greedy search for cash, had been blind to true value. She didn't understand technology or potential. She only understood what she could spend. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. It was a genuine smile, the first one I'd felt in what seemed like a lifetime. The first phase was over. The excavation of the rot was nearly complete. I had spent weeks charting the course of a sinking ship. But now, looking at the screen, I didn't see a wreck to be salvaged. I saw a fleet of new ships, waiting to be built. Get me everything you can on this, I said to Anya, my voice ringing with a new energy. I want a full market analysis, a list of potential applications, everything. The cleanup is over. I looked around the war room, at the tired but triumphant faces of my team. It's time to start building. Of course, here is the continuation of the story. The transition from excavation to construction was palpable. The air in the headquarters, which for weeks had been thick with the stale scent of old secrets and quiet fear, was now charged with a new energy, the energy of creation. The war room, once a grim tapestry of Genevieve's crimes, was reborn. The whiteboards were wiped clean of flowcharts tracing stolen money and were now covered in engineering schematics, market projections, and timelines for a project codenamed Aquarius. Project Aquarius was everything. It was the revolutionary desalinization patent, our diamond in the rough. It was the future of DeLacy Holdings. It was my new obsession. My role shifted. I was no longer the forensic accountant, the avenging angel. I was now the architect of a new enterprise. My days were spent not with lawyers and auditors, but with a hand-picked team of chemical engineers and renewable energy experts. I had poached from top universities and rival firms. I was fluent in the language of corporate fraud, but I quickly became fluent in the language of osmotic pressure, graphene membranes, and scalable energy grids. Data was data. I learned the new system just as I had learned the old one. Liam found his own role in this new world. He became the heart of the operation, while I remained its brain. He walked the floors, speaking with employees, reassuring them, learning their names and their stories. He was rebuilding the trust and morale that his mother had destroyed. He was restoring the soul of the company, while I rebuilt its bones. We had just secured our first round of venture capital funding from a forward-thinking firm in Silicon Valley that had no ties to the old money establishment. Genevieve had controlled when the first shark began to circle. The letter arrived on a Monday morning. It was from Axiom Global, a behemoth in the energy sector, notorious for its aggressive, predatory acquisition tactics. Their CEO, Silas Kane, was a man who saw the world as a collection of assets to be owned. The letter was polite, patronizing, and utterly dismissive. It acknowledged the recent unpleasantness at DeLacy Holdings and offered to alleviate our burden by purchasing the dormant subsidiary that held the Aquarius patent. The offer was a pittance, an insultingly low figure that was less than 10% of my most conservative valuation. They think we're weak, Liam said, his jaw tight as he read the letter over my shoulder. They think we're wounded, desperate for cash. Good, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Let them. Arrogance is a vulnerability. I've had some experience with that lately. I drafted a reply myself. It was one sentence. Long. Thank you for your interest, but DeLacy Holdings is not for sale. The response was swift. 2 days later, a lawsuit was filed. Axiom Global was challenging the validity of our patent, claiming a technicality, a piece of prior art from one of their own obscure research papers. It was a frivolous, baseless claim, designed not to win in court, but to bleed us dry with legal fees and delay our progress until we were forced to sell. It was a classic corporate siege. He's trying to drown us in paper. I told my legal team, a new, younger, hungrier group who had replaced Genevieve's old guard lawyers, they can keep us tied up in litigation for years. Our new chief counsel warned, by the time we win, they'll have developed their own version. Then we don't fight them in court, I said. We fight them in the open. They want to play hardball. Fine. I've had practice. My counteroffensive was threefold. First, the legal move. My team didn't just defend the patent. We went on the attack. We filed a countersuit against Axiom for anti-competitive practices and industrial espionage, alleging that their lawsuit was based on proprietary information fed to them by a former employee of the tech firm we had acquired. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. It turned their offensive maneuver into a defensive one. Second, the public relations move. I called Ms. Renault, the journalist from the wedding. I gave her another exclusive. This wasn't a story about scandal and froth. This was a story about redemption, about a historic company, brought to its knees by the greed of the old guard, being reborn as a leader in green technology, a story about creating jobs and solving the global water crisis. The article, when it ran on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, completely reframed our narrative. We were no longer the victims of a scandal. We were the heroes of a comeback story. Axiom Global, by contrast, was cast as the greedy corporate bully trying to crush a positive innovation. Third, and most importantly, the technological move. We're accelerating the timeline, I announced to the Aquarius team. I don't care what it takes. I want a working, portable prototype of the desalinization unit ready in 1 month. The team was stunned, but I saw the firelight in their eyes. The challenge excited them. For the next month, we worked around the clock. I practically lived at the office, sleeping on a couch. We'd moved into the new, minimalist space. Liam was there every night, bringing food, managing logistics, and acting as the tireless champion for the exhausted but brilliant team of scientists. At the day of the demonstration was a crisp, clear autumn afternoon. We held it not in a boardroom, but at a local marina. We had invited investors, government officials from the Department of Energy, environmental groups, and a curated list of international press, including Ms. Renault. On a small pier sat our prototype. It was a sleek, metallic cube, about the size of a small generator. I stood on the podium, with Liam by my side. My voice was clear and steady as I addressed the crowd. I didn't speak of lawsuits or corporate battles. I spoke of the future, of a world with clean, abundant water. Then, I gave the signal. An engineer dropped a hose into the murky, salt water of the harbor. With a low hum, the machine came to life. Water was drawn into the unit, and a moment later, from another spout, a stream of crystal clear, fresh water began to pour into a large glass tank. A quiet awe fell over the crowd. An engineer dipped a glass into the tank and drank it. Then another. Soon, people were crowding around, marveling at the simple, profound miracle of it. We had done it. We had proven it was real. Silas Kane, the CEO of Axiom, was there. I hadn't invited him, but I knew he would come. I saw him at the back of the crowd, his face a thunderous mask of disbelief and fury. He had come to witness a failure. Instead, he was witnessing his own defeat. His lawsuit was now irrelevant. The technology was real, and the world had just seen it work. I stepped back to the microphone, letting the quiet hum of the machine provide the soundtrack for my closing remarks. Today marks a new beginning, I said, my eyes finding Liam's. DeLacy Holdings has a proud history, but its future will be defined by innovation, not just legacy. That is why the division behind this technology will henceforth be known as Ethelgard Renewables. The name was a statement. Ethelgard, Old English for noble protector. We were not just a company. We were guardians of a new kind of future. I watched Silas Kane turn and stalk away, his battle lost. I had faced down my second monster. The first had been a queen of deceit, ruling a rotten kingdom. This one had been a king of industry, ruling a corporate empire. Both had underestimated me. Both had been defeated. I took Liam's hand, the applause of the crowd washing over us. The reconstruction was complete. The revolution had just begun. The year that followed our victory at the marina was a blur of relentless, exponential growth. Ethelgard Renewables was not just a success, it was a phenomenon. The prototype, once a curiosity on a pier, became the blueprint for a global revolution. Pilot programs, funded by our venture capital and skyrocketing stock price, were launched in drought-stricken areas of California, Australia, and the Mediterranean. Each one was a resounding success, delivering clean, fresh water at a fraction of the energy cost of previous technologies. We were not just a company anymore. We were a solution, a miracle. And I, Annalise Sterling, was its high priestess. My life transformed. The boardroom, which once felt like the ultimate seat of power, now felt small. My meetings were no longer with board members and department heads, but with ambassadors, cabinet ministers, and heads of state. I navigated the treacherous currents of international diplomacy with the same clinical precision I had once used to dissect Genevieve's financial records. The stakes were simply higher, the lies were more polished, but the patterns of greed and fear were universally human. Liam, my husband and partner, was the anchor in this new, dizzying world. While I became the face of Ethelgard's strategic vision, he became the embodiment of its soul. He established the Ethelgard Foundation, the company's philanthropic arm, dedicated to environmental education and community outreach. He was the warm, charismatic Delacy who spoke of hope and a better future, while I was the cool, pragmatic Sterling who made the difficult decisions to ensure that future was a reality. We were two sides of a coin, a perfect equilibrium of brain and heart. But the world does not allow for perfect equilibrium. The greater the power, the greater the pressure. And we were becoming more powerful than I had ever imagined. The pressure point arrived in the form of two delegations on the same day. The first was from the Republic of Zafira, a small, impoverished island nation on the brink of collapse. Decades of drought had decimated their agriculture and created a humanitarian crisis. Their ambassador, a wary, dignified woman named Elara Vance, did not come to negotiate. She came to plead. Her country had no money, no resources. They could not afford even one of our plants. They were asking for a lifeline. They were asking for charity. The second delegation was from the North Arabian Consortium, a powerful petrostate with near limitless wealth. They didn't want a lifeline, they wanted to own the ocean. Their offer, presented by a smooth, imperious prince, was staggering, a multi-hundred-billion-dollar deal for the exclusive rights to our technology within their region, and a contract to build 50 large-scale desalinization plants, enough to turn their deserts green. It was a deal that would make the most profitable energy company on the planet overnight. But it came with a condition, an exclusivity clause. All other projects, including any potential humanitarian efforts, would have to be put on hold indefinitely to meet their aggressive construction schedule. That night, the conversation I had been dreading finally happened. We were in the penthouse apartment we now kept in New York, a sterile glass box overlooking a city of infinite lights. It was a far cry from the old stone and ivy of the Delacy estate. "We can't do it, Annalise," Liam said, his voice raw with an emotion I rarely heard from him. "We can't turn our backs on people like Ambassador Vance to line the pockets of a prince. That's not who we are. That's what Genevieve would have done. It's what Silas Kane would do." "It's not that simple," I countered, my voice calm, analytical. I was pacing, my mind sifting through variables and outcomes. The Zafira situation is a tragedy, but we are a corporation, not a charity. We can't save them if we go bankrupt. The consortium's deal, Liam, the capital from that one contract would allow us to scale our manufacturing capabilities tenfold. It would fund our research and development for the next 20 years. It would give us the resources to, eventually, help hundreds of. It's a long-term strategy that lets people die now. He shot back, his face flushed. What is the point of everything we did? Of taking down my mother, of fighting off Axiom? Was it all just so we could become a newer, more efficient version of them? I thought we were building something better. It was the first real fracture between us. Not a disagreement, but a fundamental schism in our worldview. My pragmatism versus his idealism. The brain versus the heart. and for the first time, they were not in alignment. The pain of it was a sharp, physical ache in my chest. I had faced down monsters for this man, for us, but now, the monster was a moral dilemma with no easy answer, and it was threatening to tear us apart. The pressure intensified over the next week. Silas Kane, having lost the direct battle, was now playing the long game. News outlets friendly to Axiom Global began running stories questioning my leadership, framing the North Arabian deal as a greedy power grab. Simultaneously, the plight of Zafira became a cause célèbre, with humanitarian groups pressuring us to act. I was being attacked for being a ruthless capitalist and a hesitant philanthropist at the same time. Liam grew more distant, his disappointment a silent, heavy presence between us. I was trapped. Any move I made would be the wrong one. I spent 3 days locked in my office, without sleep, fueled by coffee and a cold, desperate fury. I ran every projection, every model, every possible scenario. The binary choice: profit or charity, a losing game, a trap. And I had learned long ago that the only way to win a trap is to refuse to play by its rules. You have to invent a third way. I called Liam into the boardroom. He came in, his expression guarded, prepared for another argument. The entire board, my new board, was present via video conference. On the main screen was a new proposal, Project Ethelgard. You're right, I began, looking directly at Liam. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Choosing the consortium over Zafira would make us no better than our rivals. But you are also wrong. Giving away our technology for free, before we have the infrastructure to support it, would be a noble, but fatal, gesture. The company would collapse, and we would help no one. I turned to the screen. So, we are changing the model. This is the initiative. The plan I laid out was audacious, it was complex, and it was, I knew, brilliant. We would accept the North Arabian Consortium's deal, but with new terms. We would build their 50 plants. We would give them their regional exclusivity, and they would pay a premium, a humanitarian and innovation levy of 15% on the total contract value. This levy, I explained, will be used to fully fund the Ethelgard Foundation. That foundation will then, as an independent entity, fully fund the construction of plants in developing nations, starting with the Republic of Zafira. The wealthiest nations will, in effect, subsidize the salvation of the poorest. It is not charity. It is a sustainable, scalable ecosystem. The foundation will also own a 10% equity stake in Ethelgard Renewables, ensuring its funding for perpetuity. Profit will directly fuel philanthropy. The boardroom was silent. I watched Liam's face as he processed the information. I saw the guarded suspicion melt away, replaced by a slow, dawning awe. I hadn't chosen his path or my path. I had built a bridge between them. They'll never agree to it, Philip Croft said from his square on the screen. The consortium will balk at a 15% levy. They will agree, I said with absolute certainty, because I am also licensing a limited, non-exclusive version of our second-generation technology to a new manufacturing partner in India, which will bring down the global market price in 5 years. The consortium's choice is to accept my terms now and secure their water supply for the next century, or wait and fight for scraps with everyone else later. They will choose to be kings. They always do. It was a masterful checkmate. It boxed in our rivals. It solved our moral dilemma, and it secured our future. Liam walked across the room to me. He didn't say anything. He just took my hand, his eyes full of the love and trust and partnership that I had been so terrified of losing. We were whole again. My final presentation of the Ethelgard Initiative was not to a boardroom, but to the world. I stood on the stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos, a place I never imagined I would be. I was no longer a bride in a ruined wedding, or a CEO cleaning up a mess. I was a global leader, proposing a new paradigm. Liam sat in the front row, his face a beacon of pride. I looked out at the sea of powerful faces: presidents, prime ministers, and titans of industry. They were the kind of people who had once terrified Genevieve and been courted by Silas Kane. Now, they were all looking to me. I had taken a broken legacy, survived a corporate war, and navigated a moral crisis. I had learned that true power wasn't about winning. It was about creating a game where everybody could. Here is a continuation of the story. Expanding upon the new world Anneliese has created, the applause at Davos faded, but its echo reshaped the world. The Ethelgard Initiative was not just a business model. It was a new political reality. In the 2 years that followed, I became less of a CEO and more of a sovereign entity. Our corporate headquarters in New York began to resemble a miniature United Nations. Our security detail, led by the ever-watchful Mr. Thorne, evolved from protecting a high-value executive to guarding a head of state. The plan worked with terrifying efficiency. The North Arabian Consortium, unwilling to be left behind, signed the contract with the 15% levy. The influx of capital was astronomical. It allowed us to break ground on the saffron plant ahead of schedule, an act that was hailed globally as a new dawn of compassionate capitalism. We were darlings of the press, heroes of the humanitarian sector, and the single most powerful force in renewable resources. But power, I have learned, is a form of gravity. It attracts mass, and sometimes that mass is dark, dense, and traveling at catastrophic speed. My life became a blur of secure airstrips, armored motorcades, and sterile conference rooms from Riyadh to Brussels. Liam was my constant shadow, the conscience to my pragmatism, the diplomat to my strategist. The ideological fracture we had experienced had healed, leaving behind a bond of hardened, tempered steel. We had been tested and had not broken. We thought we were invincible. The first hint that we were wrong was so subtle, I almost dismissed it. It was an anomaly in the supply chain for the Saffron project. A critical shipment of graphene membranes, originating from a lab in Germany, was delayed by a customs inspection in Rotterdam that, according to official records, never happened. The delay was only 12 hours, but it was a 12-hour ripple in a perfectly calibrated sea. My mind registered it as a statistical improbability, an outlier. 2 weeks later, the lead saffron engineer, a brilliant woman named Dr. Asha Sharma, was involved in a car accident in her home city of Mumbai while on a brief sabbatical, a truck with failed brakes. She survived, but with 2 broken legs. The project was delayed by another month. Another outlier, another statistical improbability. Mr. Thorne did not believe in coincidences. The brake lines on that truck were professionally severed, and a lease, he told me in the secure communications room of our jet, somewhere over the Atlantic, and the customs inspection in Rotterdam was conducted by men impersonating port officials. This is not corporate espionage, this is state-level tradecraft. A cold dread, an emotion I had not truly felt since the day of my wedding, began to seep into the edges of my analytical mind. Silas Kane and Axiom were a wounded, but still dangerous, rival. But this was not their style. This was too precise, too violent. The answer came from Ambassador Vance of Zephyr. She requested an urgent, face-to-face meeting, not at our headquarters, but in a neutral, public location. We met in the gardens of a museum in Geneva. The ambassador was thin, her face etched with a new, deep-seated fear. "My government is under attack," she said, her voice a low, trembling whisper. "There is a new political faction rising, funded by an outside power. They are stoking nationalist sentiment, claiming our partnership with Ethelgard is a new form of colonialism. They are saying you are a Trojan horse for Western interests." "Who is funding them?" I asked, my voice sharp. "We don't know for certain," she said, her eyes darting around the gardens. "But our intelligence points to a neighboring state. General Idris Maliki in the Republic of Kordofan. His country has controlled the region's largest river and, therefore, its water supply for a century. Your project in my country doesn't just give us water, Mrs. Sterling. It gives us independence. It breaks his stranglehold on our very existence. He sees your technology not as a gift, but as a weapon aimed at the heart of his power." General Maliki Akinyatenimi, a brutal old-school dictator, a man who had clung to power through fear and the careful, strategic control of a single, vital resource. He was a Genevieve de Lacy on a national scale, and he saw me as a threat to his entire world order. "He's not acting alone," Ambassador Vance added. "He is being advised, equipped, by someone else, a broker, someone who specializes in We believe they are the ones who targeted Dr. Sharma." The pieces clicked into place. This was a proxy war. General Maliki was the client, but the architect of our problems was this shadowy broker. We had graduated from corporate warfare to geopolitics. The prize was no longer a company. It was the fate of a nation. That night, Liam's fear was a tangible thing. "This is too much, Annalise," he pleaded, his hands holding mine, in a desperate grip. "We have to pull out." This isn't what we signed up for. These people, they don't file lawsuits, they send assassins. I can't lose you. And I can't let a man like Maliki win, I countered, my resolve hardening even as my heart ached for his fear. If we pull out now, we prove him right. We prove that progress can be halted by violence. We condemn Zafira to his rule, and we send a message to the world that our initiative, our promise, is hollow. We cannot. So, what do we do? He asked, his voice full of despair. How do we fight a ghost? By becoming a ghost ourselves, I said. My mind was already working, formulating a new kind of strategy. I had built a company. I had built a new business paradigm. Now, I would have to build my own private intelligence agency. I made a call to a number I had hoped to never use again, the encrypted portal to Nix, the ghost hunter who had helped me trap Julian. My message was simple: a new ghost, bigger, more dangerous. I need a profile. The reply came hours later. This is above my pay grade. The entity you are targeting is not a hacker. They are a shadow intelligence network known only as the Syndicate. They don't just manipulate data. They manipulate governments. My advice: run. A second message followed, but since I know you won't, I have a former colleague, more suited to this kind of work. His name is Kane. He is expensive, and he is dangerous. Consider him a weapon, not a consultant. Proceed with extreme caution. I had my new ally, or my new weapon, Kane. The next phase of my life began. I delegated much of the day-to-day running of Ethelgard to a trusted executive team. My focus became singular. With Liam by my side, his fear now channeled into a grim, protective resolvent. With the unseen assistance of this new operative, Kane, we began to fight a war in the shadows. Our boardroom became a war room once more, but the whiteboards now showed not financial data, but maps of Kordofan, photos of General Maliki's inner circle, and network charts of the Syndicate's suspected operations. We used our vast financial resources to gather intelligence. We funded opposition media in Kordofan. We used our technological superiority to feed misinformation to Maliki's regime, creating paranoia and distrust within his ranks. We became players in a game I had never wanted to join, but one I was terrifyingly suited for. The skills I had used to dismantle Genevieve's empire: pattern recognition, strategic analysis, the ruthless exploitation of an opponent's weaknesses, were the same skills required for counter-espionage. One evening, I was looking at a satellite image of the Zafaran coastline, where the foundations of our first humanitarian plant were finally being laid. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to our vision. But it was also a target, a focal point in a global shadow war. Liam came and stood behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. We looked at the image together. It never ends, does it? He said softly. No, I replied, my eyes tracing the perimeter fence of the construction site. It just escalates. First, I had fought for revenge. Then, I had fought for a company. After that, I fought for a principle. But now, standing here, directing a clandestine war against forces that moved nations, I finally understood. I was fighting for the shape of the future itself. And the battle would be waged every single day, for the rest of my life. I accepted it. This was the price of power. This was the weight of the world I had chosen to build. The silent, secret war consumed the next year of our lives. The world saw the triumphant march of the Ethelgard Initiative. The Zafaran desalinization plant went online, and the first drops of clean, life-giving water were met with tears and international celebration. We broke ground on 2 more humanitarian projects in Southeast Asia and the Horn of Africa. To the public, we were saints, visionaries. To our shareholders, we were titans, delivering unprecedented returns. But in the quiet, shielded rooms of our New York headquarters and our fortified home, a different reality played out. My life was a series of encrypted communications with Kane, my ghost of an operative. He was a specter, a voice in a secure channel, but his intelligence was flawless. We became a ruthlessly efficient team. The Syndicate would attempt to bribe a Zafaran port official to falsify fuel delivery records. We would know about it beforehand and use the official as a double agent, feeding the Syndicate corrupted data for weeks. General Maliki's agents, would attempt to plant a story in the European press about environmental damage caused by our plants. We would intercept the story and work with Ms. Renault to publish a counter-narrative, exposing the story as state-sponsored disinformation, complete with evidence of the money trail from Kordofan. We were not just defending, we were playing chess on a global board. For every pawn they moved, I maneuvered a knight. For every castle they threatened, I put their queen in check. The adrenaline was a constant hum beneath my skin. I slept in 4-hour increments, my mind never truly at rest, always processing threat assessments, analyzing satellite imagery, and authorizing covert countermeasures. Liam was my only tether to the person I had been before. He was the keeper of our humanity, but the strain was beginning to show. The light in his eyes, which had once been full of idealistic hope, was now shadowed by a constant, weary vigilance. He saw the armed guards who were a permanent fixture in our lives, the armored cars, the constant security sweeps. He saw the woman he loved transforming into something hard, remote, and dangerous. "I miss you, Annalise," he said one night, as we sat in the sterile silence of our panic room during a routine security alert. "Even when you're right here, I miss you." Before I could answer, my secure tablet buzzed. It was Kane. My attention snapped to the screen, and Liam's words, and the pain behind them, were momentarily relegated to a secondary data point. That was the cost of this war. It demanded a vigilance that bordered on inhuman. The Syndicate and General Maliki, frustrated by their inability to halt our progress through subterfuge, changed their tactics. They decided to attack the heart of the operation. Not the technology, not the finances. Me. Or rather, my only vulnerability, my only weakness. Liam was in Zafira for the 1-year anniversary of the plant going online. It was a celebration of hope, a media event designed to showcase the success of the Ethelgard initiative. He was surrounded by our best security, led by Mr. Thorne himself. But the Syndicate did not operate like a conventional force. The attack came not as a frontal assault, but as a multi-layered, brilliantly executed trap. A staged protest, funded by Maliki's agents, drew half of the security detail to the east perimeter of the plant. At the same time, a sophisticated cyberattack, far more potent than any before, temporarily disabled the plant's internal surveillance network. And in that narrow window of chaos and blindness, a 3-man team of highly trained mercenaries, who had entered the country weeks before under the guise of aid workers, reached the main compound. Their target was Liam. I was watching the event via a live satellite feed from our war room in New York. I saw the protest begin. I saw the screens go dark. A cold, primal terror, an emotion I had suppressed for years, seized me. For a full 90 seconds, I was blind and deaf, my mind screaming into a void of static. When the feeds came back online, it was to a scene of chaos. Mr. Thorne's voice was in my ear, sharp and breathless. "Attack repelled. Mr. de Lacy is secure." I repeat, he is secure. We had a contingency. They did not expect us to have our own internal network. 2 hostiles down, 1 escaped. I sank into my chair, my body trembling, my analytical mind completely overwhelmed by a tidal wave of raw, visceral emotion. They had come for him. They had tried to take the one thing in my life that was not a part of the war, the one thing that was still sacred. The strategist in my head went silent. And the queen, the predator, the woman who had destroyed her mother-in-law's wedding dress, awoke, and she was filled with a rage that was terrifying in its absolute clarity. The defensive war was over. "Kane," I said, into my secure line, my voice a low, chilling monotone. I didn't need to explain what had happened. He already knew. The objective has changed. This is no longer about containment. It is about eradication. I want General Maliki. I want his regime dismantled. I want the Syndicate burned to the ground. Spare no expense. Observe no rules of engagement. There was a pause on the other end. Then, Kane's text appeared. "With pleasure. My new strategy was not about defense. It was about total annihilation. We would not just counter Maliki. We would remove him from the board. Permanently." Kane's intelligence network went into overdrive. Within a week, we had what we needed. General Maliki, like all dictators, had a fatal weakness: his own greed. For 30 years, He had been systematically looting his country's treasury and stashing the wealth in a complex web of more than 200 secret bank accounts and shell corporations across the globe. It was his escape plan, his retirement fund, his ultimate source of power. It was the same crime Genevieve had committed, but on a scale 1,000 times larger. And I knew exactly how to dismantle it. The attack was silent, digital, and devastating. It happened on a Thursday at 0800 Greenwich Mean Time. My legal teams in 7 different countries, acting on the detailed intelligence provided by Kane, filed court orders to freeze every known asset tied to Maliki and his inner circle. Banks from Switzerland to Singapore were served with court-sanctioned freezes, locking away billions of dollars in an instant. His financial empire was paralyzed. At 0805, our PR machine went into action. We didn't just leak the information, we gave Ms. Renault and a consortium of other trusted journalists direct, undeniable proof, bank statements, wire transfers, deeds to hidden properties. The story of Maliki's grand theft went global, instantly destroying any shred of legitimacy his regime had left. At 0810, the final, most crucial phase began. We used our own networks to disseminate the same information inside the Republic of Kordofan. Not just to opposition groups, but to the general populace. To the military, we showed the underpaid soldiers how their general had stolen billions while their families starved. We showed the people the palaces he owned in Paris and London while their infrastructure crumbled. Then, Kane made his move. He established a secure back-channel communication with a rival general within the Kordofanian army, a man named Tariq al-Hamad, whom our intelligence had identified as ambitious, pragmatic, and relatively clean. We provided al-Hamad with one critical piece of information: the location of Maliki's personal, hidden command bunker. I stood with Liam in our New York war room. The vast screens that once showed financial data now showed a mosaic of live news feeds from Kordofan capital, satellite heat maps, and Kane's encrypted intelligence stream. We watched as a nation fell apart and was reborn in real time. We saw the riots begin in the city square. We saw the soldiers lay down their arms and join the people. We saw the feed from a drone as General al-Hamad's forces stormed Maliki's bunker. We saw the fall of a dictator, not with bombs and bullets, but with data and truth. Liam looked at me, his face a complex mask of awe and terror. He had seen me take down a company. He had seen me build a global initiative, but this was something else entirely. He was watching his wife topple a nation from a room in Manhattan. "It's over," he whispered. "No," I said, my eyes fixed on the chaotic, burning images on the screen. "It's just begun." I had done it. I had protected Liam. I had protected our creation. To do so, I had become a power unto myself, a force capable of reshaping nations and dethroning kings. The relief I felt was fleeting, instantly replaced by the cold, heavy realization of what I had become. I had built an empire of hope on a foundation of ruthless, clandestine warfare, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I would have to defend it by any means necessary for the rest of my life.